My wife secretly inherited $300, $0 from her aunt, then forged my signature to sell our house and split the proceeds. Now she's leaving me for her boyfriend while I face eviction and a court battle over stolen property. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be nothing but a lying, cheating snake. But here I am. The craziest thing. It all started with a seemingly innocent inheritance. I mean, how could I have known that the money she inherited from her Aunt 300 would be the beginning of everything falling apart? That, and her secret life, her lies, her betrayal. If I'm honest, I had my suspicions, but I never imagined she'd do something this cold and calculated. Lisa and I met in college. She was the girl everyone wanted, pretty, confident, a little bitchy but charming enough to get away with it. We got married after a few years, and for the most part I thought we had a good thing going. She was ambitious, always talking about her future and our plans. But lately there been little signs that something was off. She started working late more often, coming home with a new attitude, acting distant but also defensive if I asked what was wrong. She'd brush me off, say I was reading too much into things. Still, I wanted to believe in us, in her. Then about 3 months ago, I stumbled across an email while she was in the shower. I'd been using her laptop to look up some work stuff, just a quick search, and I saw the email from her aunt's lawyer. It mentioned the inheritance 300 and a lot of legal jargon I didn't understand. But what caught my eye was the attached document, her aunt's will, which left her that money. I remember feeling this strange, cold shock. I didn't even know her aunt was sick, let alone that she'd left Lisa a fortune. My first thought was, why didn't she tell me? A few days later, I found more. Bank statements showing deposits labeled inheritance just sitting in her account. She'd been hiding this from me, I guess, because she knew I'd flip out. But what really knocked me on my ass was discovering she'd already taken steps to do something about it. I found a copy of a forged signature, mine, on a document that authorized her to sell our house. She managed to get a lawyer, forged my signature, and was already in the process of selling the place. The house we'd built together, the one I'd poured my blood into, was about to be gone. I couldn't believe it. I confronted her that night. I showed her the bank statements, the fake document. Her face at first was a mask of calm, but then her eyes darted around like she was trying to come up with a lie. She told me she'd inherited the money from her aunt, that it was none of my business, and that she had every right to do what she wanted with her own inheritance. She acted like I was some paranoid husband who didn't trust her. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying from the start, hiding her money, maybe even planning to leave me for a long time. The thing is, Lisa's the kind of woman who's always been good at hiding her true intentions. She's manipulative, always spinning stories, blaming others for her mistakes. When I pressed her about the forged signature, she called me crazy and said I was overreacting. That I didn't understand how much she'd been through, how hard it was for her to inherit that money after losing her aunt. But I wasn't buying it. I could see the lies behind her eyes. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while. The inheritance, the sale of the house, her sudden coldness, it all clicked into place. The emotional blow hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated. I'd trusted her with everything. Our marriage, our future, even our home, sold out from under me while she was out screwing around with her boyfriend, Jake, I later found out. That's when I started piecing it all together. She'd been acting different, more secretive, more distant, and I'd ignored the signs, thinking it was just stress or work. But the truth was, she'd been cheating on me for months, maybe even longer. And the inheritance, that was her way of planning her escape, I realized. She didn't care about me or the house. She just wanted the money and to get out. I spent the next few days in a fog, angry, hurt, and trying to process what I'd learned. I went from feeling like I was on top of the world, building a life with her, to feeling like I'd been played. The betrayal cut deep. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I trusted her so blindly. I'd always thought she was ambitious, driven, but now I saw her for what she really was, a liar and a thief. The worst part, I knew she'd already started the process of selling the house. I had to do something. I couldn't just let her walk away with my life's work and the money I'd helped build. That's when I began to hatch my plan. I didn't want her to get away with it. She thought she had the perfect cover, the perfect escape route, but I was done being the fool. I'd find a way to fight back, to reclaim what was mine. Little did she know I'd start digging into her secrets, into her lies, and I'd make sure she paid for every bit of this. I'd make her regret ever crossing me. That's the kind of guy I am. Once I see the truth, I don't stop until I get justice. After I confronted Lisa that night, everything changed. She tried to brush it off, act like I was overreacting, but I wasn't about to let her get away with lying to my face. I knew she'd been sneaking around, hiding the inheritance, forging my signature, planning to sell our house behind my back. The anger boiled inside me, but I also felt a deep sense of betrayal. How could the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, do something so cold? I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I knew I had to act fast or she'd drain everything, leave me with nothing. The first thing I did was dig into her phone and emails. I wanted to find out just how far her lies went. I found texts with Jake, her boyfriend, talking about getting out and starting fresh. She'd been seeing him for months, I realized, and she'd been hiding it well. I also discovered she'd been lying to her friends, telling them she was working late or busy with family stuff when she was really with Jake. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for a while. The inheritance, the house, they were just tools for her to get what she wanted. I didn't want her to leave with everything. I decided I needed to get legal advice immediately. I found a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and fraud. I told him everything about the inheritance, the forged signature, her plans to sell the house. The lawyer was appalled but said I had a solid case to challenge the sale, especially since I had proof of the forged signature and her deception. I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe I could stop her before she took all the money and ran. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, pretending to be the innocent victim. She told me she was confused and overwhelmed and that I was overreacting. She accused me of not trusting her, said I was paranoid and jealous. She even had the nerve to cry, trying to guilt me into backing off. But I saw through her. She was a master manipulator, and I knew she was trying to buy time. She wanted to sell that house, cash out, and leave me with nothing. I couldn't let that happen. I started to gather evidence, screenshots of her texts, copies of the forged documents, bank statements. I wanted everything ready for the court. I also reached out to her lawyer, who confirmed that the sale was invalid because of the forgery. I was feeling more determined than ever. I knew I had to fight for my rights, for what was legally mine, and for the truth. The betrayal was one thing, but losing my home and savings to this lying bitch, that was unacceptable. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt like I was losing my mind at times. I'd loved Lisa, trusted her, built a life with her. Now I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything for money and a new life with Jake. I kept asking myself how I could have missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. But deep down, I knew I had to focus on stopping her. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to protect what was left of my dignity and my future. In the meantime, she was busy trying to spin her version of events to friends and family. She told them I was abusive, controlling, and that I was jealous of her inheritance. She painted herself as the victim, the wronged wife who just wanted to start fresh. But I knew the truth. I saw her for what she was, a liar, a thief, a cheat, and I was going to make sure everyone else saw it too. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my life and my money, not without a fight. Every day I felt more alive with purpose. I was no longer just a husband betrayed. I was a man fighting for what was rightfully his. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, and I knew she'd do everything in her power to cover her tracks, but I also knew I had truth on my side. And that, in the end, would be what saves me. I wasn't just going to roll over and let her destroy everything I'd worked for. I was going to take her down, piece by piece, until she paid for every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. The more I dug into her lies, the more I realized how deep this whole thing went. Lisa was always good at hiding her true motives, but now I saw her for what she was, a master manipulator who'd do anything for money and a fresh start. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The inheritance was just the tip of the iceberg. The forged signature, the sale of our home, her affair with Jake, all part of a bigger plan to cut me out and leave me with nothing. I remember sitting in my apartment, going through all the evidence I'd collected, screenshots of her texts with Jake, copies of the forged documents, bank statements. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I kept asking myself how someone I loved could do this to me, how she could lie, cheat, steal from me, and then turn around and act like I was the crazy one. But I was done playing nice. I knew I had to take control to stop her from ruining my life completely. I contacted a lawyer again and laid everything out. This time, I pressed him for an emergency injunction to freeze the sale of the house. He told me it was possible, especially with the forged documents and proof of her deception. I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe I could stop her before she got away with everything, but I also knew I had to be quick. Lisa was already talking to her lawyer, trying to push the sale through, probably thinking I'd back off. Not a chance. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude started to shift. She became more aggressive, more dismissive. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of ruining her life, and even start crying in front of friends and family, claiming I was abusive and controlling. She told everyone I was jealous of her inheritance, that I was just mad because I didn't want her to have her own money. It was all part of her game to make me look like the bad guy, but I wasn't buying it. I knew the truth. The emotional toll was brutal. Every day I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd loved her, trusted her, built a life with her, what felt like forever ago. Now it was all falling apart. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, obsessing over every lie, every secret she'd kept. My trust was shattered. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized that I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight for what was mine, my home, my money, my dignity. I started reaching out to a few close friends, telling them what was going on. I needed support, someone to talk to. One of them, Mark, was especially helpful. He told me stories of similar betrayals, how sometimes the only way to deal with a lying, manipulative wife was to take her down legally and emotionally. He said I had to be careful, that Lisa was a master at twisting things to her advantage. But he also told me I had the strength to see this through. That gave me some hope. I also made a plan to confront her again, knowing she'd try to spin her version of events. I wanted to see how far she was willing to go, how much she'd lie to protect herself. I set up a meeting at a neutral place, told her I wanted to talk about the house and everything else. She showed up looking smug, like she already knew she was going to win. But I was ready. I had all the evidence. I knew her game. When I confronted her face to face, she started with her usual lies, saying she inherited the money legitimately, that I was paranoid, that I had no right to control her. She even had the nerve to say she loved me, but her actions told a different story. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew everything, that I had proof of her forgery, her affair, her plans to leave me with nothing. I told her she wasn't going to get away with this, that I'd fight her in court and expose her for the liar she was. Her reaction was priceless. She froze for a second, then started yelling, calling me a controlling, jealous husband. She said I was ruining her life, that she deserved happiness and money after everything she'd been through. I felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. It hit me hard that the woman I loved was capable of this level of deception. I realized I was no longer fighting for her. I was fighting for myself, my future, my dignity. I'd been a fool for so long, but I was done with that. From now on, I was going to take back what was mine. And I was going to make sure she paid for every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. The days that followed that confrontation were a blur of legal battles, secret inspections, and mounting frustration. I kept pushing the lawyer to do everything possible to freeze the sale of the house. The evidence of forgery and her lies was overwhelming, but Lisa was fighting back hard, spinning stories left and right. She told everyone I was abusive, controlling, and jealous, anything to turn the tables. She even claimed I'd been violent, which was a total lie. I never laid a hand on her, but her words made me feel like I was losing my grip. Still, I knew I had to stay focused. I started noticing more things that confirmed she was trying to cover her tracks. Her phone was constantly disappearing. She deleted messages, and she was sneaking around more than ever. I found out she'd been in contact with a real estate agent behind my back, trying to push the sale through before I could stop it. She thought she could outsmart me, but I had the evidence, and I had the law on my side. The feeling of betrayal grew worse every day, but I also felt a strange sense of determination. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything I'd worked for. One night, I caught her trying to access our joint bank account on her phone. I saw her typing in a password I didn't recognize, and I immediately knew she was trying to drain the account or hide money. I was furious. I called her out on it, and she just brushed me off, saying I was paranoid and that she had every right to do what she wanted with her inheritance. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying about everything, even about the money she supposedly inherited. It wasn't just her inheritance. She'd been secretly funneling money into her own accounts, planning her escape. I decided I needed to get proof of her financial manipulations, so I hired a private investigator. I wanted a complete picture of her finances, her contacts, her plans. It wasn't just about stopping the sale anymore. It was about exposing her for the manipulative liar she was. The pie came back with some shocking reports. Lisa had been transferring money to Jake, setting up new accounts, and even buying a small apartment in another city, all behind my back. That was it. She was serious about leaving, and she'd been doing it for months. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of innocence, crying to her friends and family, claiming she was the victim of my controlling ways. She said I'd been abusive, that I'd never loved her, that I was just jealous of her inheritance. But I knew better. I'd seen her texts, her lies, her plans. I'd been betrayed at every turn. It was like waking up from a nightmare. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was now just a stranger, a con artist who'd used me as a pawn in her game. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I couldn't give up. I had to keep pushing forward. I made arrangements to file a court motion to freeze the house sale and to start a formal investigation into her finances and her forgery. I also prepared myself for the worst. She might try to fight me in court, lie even more, or try to disappear with everything. But I was ready. I'd learned a lot about her in these past weeks. She was clever, yes, but I was determined to outsmart her. One thing I realized was that I'd been giving her too much leeway, too much trust. I had to be more strategic. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every suspicious activity, every lie. I also reached out to some of her friends, warning them about her manipulations. I didn't want her to succeed in her scheme to leave me with nothing. I was starting to see that this was about more than just money. It was about respect, dignity, and fairness. I wasn't going to let her destroy that. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My lawyer informed me that the court had granted the injunction to freeze the house sale. Lisa's face fell when she heard. She tried to argue, to spin her lies, but the evidence was too strong. I felt a rush of relief mixed with anger. She thought she could just take everything and walk away, but now she was stuck. Her plans were crumbling, and I knew this was just the beginning of the end. I had the law on my side, and I was going to see this through to the bitter end. The court hearing was a whirlwind. Lisa showed up, her eyes full of false innocence, trying to look hurt and betrayed. She spun her usual stories, claiming I was abusive, that I'd been controlling, that she needed her independence. She even brought her mother, who sat there crying and nodding along, trying to sway the judge with her own version of poor Lisa. But I had all the evidence, texts, bank statements, the forged signatures, and the reports from the private investigator. I knew I'd win, and I needed that win badly. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out. How she'd inherited the money, how she forged my signature, how she was planning to sell the house behind my back, and how she'd been cheating on me with Jake. I told the court about the emotional toll, how I felt betrayed and humiliated, how she'd used me as a pawn. I emphasized that I wasn't trying to ruin her, I just wanted what was fair, that I wanted to stop her from ripping me off and destroying what little was left of our marriage. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the evidence. She asked Lisa some pointed questions about the forged documents and her plans to leave. Lisa squirmed, trying to deny everything but the proof was overwhelming. When the judge finally made her ruling, she granted the injunction, blocking the sale of the house and ordering Lisa to produce all financial records. The look on Lisa's face was priceless. She realized her plans were falling apart. After the court session, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I had fought hard and I'd won that round. But I knew this was just the beginning of a long battle. Lisa was furious, calling me vindictive and jealous. She told everyone I was the villain, that I'd been abusive and controlling, trying to ruin her life. She even accused me of trying to steal her inheritance. But I didn't care. I had the proof, and I was prepared to take this all the way to the end. That night I sat alone in my apartment, feeling the weight of everything I'd been through. I thought about how I'd trusted her, how I'd believed in us. And now I was facing the reality that she'd been lying, cheating, and plotting behind my back for months. It hurt more than I could describe, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to focus on rebuilding myself. I'd lost a lot: my house, my trust, my peace of mind. But I still had my integrity and I still had a chance to start over. I reached out to a few close friends for support. Mark was especially helpful, reminding me that sometimes you have to lose everything to truly find yourself. I told him I was ready to fight for what's rightfully mine: my house, my money, my dignity. I knew Lisa wouldn't give up easily. She'd try to lie, manipulate, maybe even try to disappear. But I was prepared for that. I'd keep pushing, keep fighting. I owed it to myself to see this through, no matter how ugly it got. In the days that followed, I focused on gathering every piece of evidence, preparing for the next court dates, and making sure Lisa couldn't pull any more tricks. I also started to distance myself emotionally. No more late-night calls, no more trying to reason with her. I realized I had to protect myself, both legally and mentally. It was clear that Lisa's betrayal was about money, control, and her own selfish desires. She lied about everything, and now I was making sure she paid for it. I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and my sanity. The final stretch was the most intense. Lisa, realizing she was losing her grip on everything she'd schemed for, became more desperate. She tried to negotiate, to spin more lies, claiming she'd done it all for us, that she'd only wanted a better life. But I'd heard enough. I had the court's ruling, the evidence that proved her guilt, and a legal team that was relentless. The day they finally scheduled the sale of the house, a sale she desperately tried to push through before I could stop it, I knew it was do or die. I remember sitting in the courtroom, my heart pounding, watching her face twist with anger and frustration as the judge announced that the sale was permanently halted. Her eyes darted, her mouth opened to scream, but she knew she'd been beaten. The judge ordered her to turn over all documents related to the inheritance, the forged signatures, and the transfer of funds. She was furious, calling everyone she could to cry foul, to accuse me of destroying her future, but the truth was out. Everyone saw through her lies now. What followed was a long, messy court battle, one that dragged on for months. She kept trying to manipulate the system, filing appeals, claiming I was harassing her, but I had the evidence, and I stayed consistent. The more she fought, the more her deception unraveled. I finally got her to admit in court that she'd forged my signature and that she'd been planning her escape for a long time. The judge sentenced her to pay restitution for the fraud and ordered her to return the stolen funds. The house was awarded back to me, and I finally felt like I had some justice. The aftermath was bittersweet. Lisa moved out, bitter and broken, still trying to spin her lies to anyone who'd listen. I had to start from scratch, rebuilding what I'd lost: my trust, my home, my sense of stability. But I also gained something invaluable: clarity. I saw her for what she truly was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd use anyone to get what she wanted. I learned that sometimes the greatest lesson is about trusting yourself, being cautious about who you let into your life, and standing up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets. Looking back, I realize I was naive for a long time. I gave her too much leeway, too much trust. But I also learned that betrayal comes in many forms, and sometimes the only way to survive it is to fight back with everything you have. I'm still healing, still trying to piece my life together, but I'm stronger now. I know what I want, what I deserve, and I refuse to let anyone take that away from me again. To anyone out there facing something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. And when you find yourself betrayed, don't be afraid to fight for your rights, your dignity, and your future. Sometimes, justice isn't easy, but it's worth every ounce of effort. I survived this nightmare, and I came out the other side knowing I'm a lot tougher than I ever thought. And that's the biggest lesson I'll carry forward.